So thank you for your patience. So welcome to the Clothesline Project on the Green. This is now in its 24th year, and I'm Helen Archontou, the CEO of the YWCA Bergen County, and we operate healingSPACE, Bergen County's only sexual violence resource center. And we also are the host of today's event, which is designed to raise community awareness about violence against women, men, and children, and demonstrate to survivors that they are not alone. As you walk through this powerful display today, you will see t-shirts created by survivors of sexual violence, domestic violence, child abuse, personal violence. These t-shirts promote healing by providing an avenue for survivors and their loved ones to break the silence. If you are a survivor, if a family member is, a friend, or just a supporter and ally, we invite you to take some time to create a shirt while you're here today and to add to our collection. Survivors are every age, every gender, every race, every ethnic group, and every sexual orientation. The Clothesline Project is an opportunity for the community to come together and show support for those affected by violence, share resources, and recognize all of the important work in this area. In light of the recent word from Education Secretary Betsy DeVos that the department plans to roll back Title IX guidelines on preventing and responding to campus sexual violence, potentially undermining schools' motivation to comply and discouraging survivors from coming forward and reporting assaults, it is especially important today in this time that we come together and as a community at events like this, we use our voices through all available channels to support essential anti-violence measures in policy and practice alike. We want our voices heard. We want these pictures shown. We encourage you to take photos of everything you're seeing here today, share it on your social media, share it with your friends, and let people know that it's important to support survivors and let them know that we care. We are so honored that today's event is a partnership with so many wonderful community organizations that are doing important work and that together we all are impacting and supporting sexual violence survivors. And that includes Bergen Community College Violence Intervention Prevention Center, Bergen County Alternatives to Domestic Violence, Bergen County Department of Health Services, Bergen County Division of Addiction Services, Buddies of New Jersey, Center for Hope and Safety, Felician University, Manavi, National Council of Jewish Women, Bergen County Section, Northeast New Jersey Legal Services, PFLAG of Bergen County, Rainbow Cafe, the Renfrew Center, and the Women's Rights Information Center. They are all here today. They've all had volunteers to help us get this event up and running, and we're so grateful for their support and partnership to get the word out about this event. Please stop by their tables, learn about them, meet them, learn about the important work that they're doing, and take the valuable resources back to your friends and family. I also must give a very big thank you to Suez Water, North Jersey. At 6 a.m., they and their trucks were at our our storage space, loading up all of these t-shirts and all the supplies for today's events. And then their volunteers continued here to help hang the shirts and be part of this event. And I also have to thank them, specifically Miss Lori Murray, who's here today, because of their poking and prodding over the last 4 years. We know that it was wonderful that we were able to take the Clothesline Project on the road over the last few years and get it into so many communities and get the word out about it. But Lori kept talking about how much they missed having this event, and really she was instrumental in us bringing it back together here today, so we're so grateful. And I also want to just quickly thank all of our healingSPACE and YWCA staff and volunteers who together have worked tirelessly over the last few months to make this Clothesline Project possible. They do critically important work every day in terms of our services for survivors, our 24-hour hotline, our counseling services, our prevention and community education services, and all the volunteer work that we do in the community. But they also obviously are so committed and have put everything here together today. And thank you to the City of Hackensack for letting us be here in this space. We're honored to have representatives for the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office today. We have Captain Jay Love and Sergeant Linda McNulty with us. We're grateful for them making the time. They are partners of ours, and we work very closely on the cases that we do involving sexual violence. And we're very, very honored to have our three impactful speakers with us, Senator Loretta Weinberg and Assemblywoman Valerie Vainieri Huttle, as well as multimedia journalist and survivor Maureen Shaw. So let me start by introducing you to Senator Loretta Weinberg, who really doesn't need an introduction because I know everyone in our community is very aware of the impactful work that she's done over the course of her important, significant career. Her public service in local, county, and state government, she has championed issues that have impacted women, children, families, health care, gun safety, and quality of life concerns. She has also been untiring supporter of Bergen County groups and New Jersey organizations that safeguard the family and improve the physical and mental health of children, as well as advanced services for children with autism, adults with aphasia, and military veterans. As Assemblywoman when she represented the 37th District, she left a legacy of sponsoring laws that protected and improved the lives of men, women, and children. And since her election to the State Senate in 2005, she's continued to work to improve the lives of New Jersey residents. We are so lucky to have her here in our district, and we are so grateful that she made the time to be here today because we know she has to get to the next event. So without further ado, Senator Weinberg.
Thank you very much, and thank you most particularly to the YWCA for continuing this fine program. And a part of me that says I'm sorry we still have to continue it, but unfortunately we do. I was kind of glancing at the t-shirts, and one that shows so much hope is it says something about being able to laugh without fear of the future. And that's what this is all about, and that's what our legislation that has evolved over the last number of years, along with my colleague in the Assembly, Valerie Vainieri Huttle, is to reach a society where everybody can laugh without fear of the future. We did get one big triumph in the last couple of months in terms of legislation, and that was to set up a process to be able to remove guns from the homes of domestic violence abusers. Even that was a long road. Now, I was privileged to be asked by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Stuart Radner, to serve on a special ad hoc committee on the courts, law enforcement, and domestic violence. And out of that ad hoc committee, we have a whole group of new bills that have been dropped into the Senate and hopefully into the Assembly, bipartisan, co-prime sponsored by Senator Diane Allen, a colleague across the aisle, and I'm hoping to see that package of bills passed before this legislature goes out of business officially in January. They are an important package because it is very often the prosecutor's office, the local municipal judge, the court system, that somebody seeking redress and safety from domestic violence has to first go to and count on. So this is, I think, a very important step forward for all of us, and we are devoted to getting that package of bills passed. Any of you can go online and check them or call my office and we'll be happy to share them with you. And again, my thanks. We have a beautiful, clear, sunny day today so that everybody can go around and read these shirts that tell in brief words so many stories that we would like to see end with laugh without fear of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator. We really do appreciate. We know that she literally, like many others, is hopping in the car and making over to another very important event that's happening today, the senior picnic, where the YWCA Bergen County is also being represented. And now let me introduce you to Assemblywoman Valerie Vainieri Huttle. She has been representing New Jersey's 37th Legislative District since 2005 and was named Deputy Speaker of the General Assembly in 2015. She also has served on the Bergen County Board of Chosen Freeholders from 2001 to 2007. Assemblywoman Huttle has sponsored laws such as Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act, the Human Trafficking Prevention, Protection, and Treatment Act, and the End of the Return Home New Jersey program to ensure that individuals with developmental disabilities receive proper care. She also authored the Task Force for Campus Sexual Violence, which did some I guess I can say it even though I was on it, but I think did some important work this year, and we're grateful that she had the foresight to to put that group together. She also is a leader in efforts to reform the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and the chair of the Assembly Human Services Committee. We also share a birthday, which will be in 2 days. So my birthday mate, let me introduce you to my friend and colleague.
We don't share the same year though, Helen, but thank you. I too want to thank Helen and the YWCA and the healingSPACE for organizing this year's Clotheslines. You know, there's something to be said about airing out your dirty laundry. Sometimes it's good to air out your dirty laundry. And when I look at the t-shirts, and I've probably been coming here since 2000, and I just said, I hope that these aren't all new, that, you know, they've been accumulated throughout the years. Because I hope that one day, even though we have the t-shirts for healing and support, that we see less of these, but always remind us that there's abuse and that we need to support and heal the victims. So I want to take a moment to recognize the victims, survivors, and their families. It really is a beautiful way to really give us a gentle reminder about domestic violence and sexual assault. And I'm glad that Helen mentioned the latest attack on Title IX, because we've come such a long way in New Jersey by recommending, as Helen mentioned, we have the Sexual Task Force for college campuses, and the recommendations were wonderful. And so we've come a long way to make sure that we are continuing to educate not our college kids, not our high school kids, but starting in middle school, because early education is key for women to understand that they're not supposed to be abused, and for boys to understand they're not to be abusers. And I'm stereotyping because we all know what happens in both, but primarily in women. And I just want to read a story recently that I read about a Maryland woman who was 7 months pregnant and was forced to deliver her baby after she was set on fire by her boyfriend. She was doused with gasoline in the bathtub. This is not okay. And it reminds me of the story, and I think I say it almost every year when I talk at the shelter, and when I talk here. I am a funeral director by profession, and I've seen the fatal effects of domestic violence and sexual assault. It reminds me of the day, one of my first funeral arrangements, the mother came in, her daughter was dead, was afraid to really explain how she died, but her ex-husband, who had a restraining order against her, came and doused her on fire with gasoline. Going back over 20 years ago. No one wanted to talk about it. I'm going back also and remembering when my daughter was looking at colleges, and the Sexual Assault Rape Crisis Center was in the basement, and no one really wanted to see it. I applaud the colleges today that are in the forefront of when the families do visit and take your children to school, that they are rape crisis centers. There is support, because the statistics are alarming. I should know these by heart, but they keep on unfortunately changing. But 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be raped at some point in their lives. And nearly 1 in 10 women have been raped by an intimate partner in her lifetime. And so when we think about rape and we think about it's going to be that stranger in the alleyway as you're walking home in the dark, no. It's that person that you know. It's the relationship you are in. And so the senator talked about legislation preventing guns in the hands of domestic abusers. I'm also want to make sure that the recommendations that the Sexual Task Force came about, with Helen as an integral member of that task force, that we will make sure that we put into legislation. Again, it's so hard to legislate morality, but we need to change the culture, and the only way to change that culture is to start early education, teaching each of us not to be ashamed, air out your dirty laundry, and heal. And so I thank all of you, and I'm going to run to the next event too. I was telling somebody it's a senior picnic. I started it 20 years ago, now I'm a senior. Thank you. Happy birthday.
Thank you. We do this every year. Happy birthday. Yes. And she's got a wedding coming in her family too. There's lots of happiness going on in the Huttle household. So now, thank you so much to Assemblywoman Huttle for sharing her work and her insights with us. And I now would like to introduce you to Miss Maureen Shaw. Maureen Shaw is a multimedia journalist and writer. She is a founder and editor-in-chief of Shreets, and I don't know if I pronounced that. She Writes. Oh, they didn't put a, I thought it looked weird, they didn't put a space. Okay, She Writes. And a communication consultant. Maureen's writing has appeared widely in print and on online publications. She's been published in The Atlantic, Huffington Post, Femme 2.0, Jezebel, as well as the New York Daily News. Maureen has dedicated the better part of the past decade of her life to volunteering and working for women's rights organizations. Today, she will share with us her essay, Find Your Voice and Carry a Big Sign, and it's about her journey from overcoming sexual assault as a teenager to becoming an outspoken activist, writer, and mother. We're so grateful that she's here to share her story. If it wasn't for the courage of survivors who are able to get to the point of coming forward and sharing their story, we really would not be able to help others as much as we do. So we're so grateful. And without further ado, Miss Maureen Shaw.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here. As she mentioned, I'm just going to be reading an essay of mine that was published in 2016 in a book that is completely dedicated to overcoming and healing from sexual assault. At 15, I became a statistic. In hindsight, the assault itself, committed by someone I trusted, was but a fly speck on my life's timeline. It was terrifying, but it was finite. Conversely, the prolonged emotional aftermath of the attack has shaped the trajectory of my life. I did not speak a word of my rape for 7 years. Like many victims, I blamed myself and internalized the trauma, which manifested itself in a litany of self-destructive behaviors. It wasn't until my senior year of college that I spilled my secret to a supportive group of students in my women's studies class. It was like a dam burst. Once I spoke my truth, there was no going back. I began attending group therapy for survivors on campus. I spoke at my university's Take Back the Night, and I decided to come out as a rape survivor to my immediate family and close friends. I used that term to describe my disclosure because in many ways I had been living a secret life in which a formative experience, in large part of who I am, was compartmentalized and shelved away. I feared how my loved ones would react upon learning I had been raped. Would they blame me? Be angry that I hid this secret for so long, or think of me as damaged goods? I will never forget the day I told my parents their youngest child had been a victim of rape. The anguish on their faces belied their attempt to be strong, which simultaneously broke my heart and infuriated me. It was the first time I truly grasped the ripple effect of sexual assault. I was angry that my rapist had not only stolen my joy, but had shattered the peace in my parents' hearts. While I had suffered the physical trauma alone, the emotional trauma was now a shared experience. My parents swallowed their pain to rally around me, as did my siblings and friends once I told them. With each retelling, I realized that the shame I had been carrying for so long did not belong to me. it was my rapists. What's more, I understood that the displaced shame thrived on my silence, and I refused to be complicit in my own suffering any longer. For me, that meant dismantling the stigma and humiliation surrounding sexual assault by speaking about it. Once I began sharing my story, initially among my inner circles and later more widely as an activist and a writer, I found my strength. I felt empowered each time I identified as a rape survivor because I had survived. I waded through some of the ugliest feelings I've experienced to date, and I survived those too. The more I spoke and wrote about my assault, the easier it was to revisit that dark chapter in my life. And the more I opened up, the more other survivors began to share their stories with me. Slowly, the event that had left me isolated throughout my adolescence transformed into a unifying experience that gave me a sense of community. Really, community is what propelled me toward healing and gave me the courage to begin advocating for other survivors. I joined the local chapter of a national feminist organization and poured my energy into seeking justice for rape survivors. This process came with a steep learning curve, not just about the complexities of sexual assault, but also about myself. I was a complete rookie when I began volunteering. I was naive about the systematic and institutional nature of victim blaming, and I had no hands-on activist experience. I had zero insight into how different identities can influence a survivor's experience. I was a middle-class, young, white woman, and the obstacles I encountered during my healing journey are assuredly different from those facing women of color, men, low income, LGBT, or gender non-conforming queer people. Consciousness would come with time. I vividly recall my first protest. Various organizations and individuals came together in outrage over a subpar sentencing recommendation for a convicted rapist. Armed with a sign demanding that our justice system take rape seriously, I marched in front of the court alongside vendor and activists, and every time I tried to join the chants, "If you do the crime, you must do the time," I choked up. That lump in my throat wasn't born out of sadness, but from an overwhelming feeling of togetherness and pride. I was incredibly proud to be part of a movement that dedicated itself to protecting and promoting women's rights, and one that fearlessly advocated for sexual assault victims. Feelings of awe aside, I remained unconvinced of what end result, if any, our action would have that day. As it turns out, our protest and an online petition made a difference. The judge handed down the maximum allotted sentence. That triumph, my first real taste of feminist activism, taught me a powerful lesson I will never forget, that speaking up can make a tangible difference, and not just in one's own healing journey, but in the lives of others. I loved playing a part, no matter how small, in that process. And over the course of the next several years, each time I attended a protest, led a group of volunteers in letter writing campaigns, or sat in a courtroom in solidarity with a victim plaintiff, I shattered the silence that had trapped me for so long. I grew confident, I developed a purpose, and I became fierce. An unexpected and very welcome sidebar to my immersion in feminism was the reclaiming of my sexuality on my terms. For years, sex had been transactional, as something I engaged in, though never valued, mostly because it felt so tainted by my rape. My feminist awakening sparked a sensual awakening. The confidence and strength I drew from activism translated to a healthier sense of self, mind, and body. Once I learned to believe in myself as a capable, spirited human being with valid feelings and passions, it spilled over to the physical. I have no doubts that feminism helped create the best version of myself, and this is the person my now husband fell in love with. By the time we met, I'd had years of being publicly identified as a survivor, and I no longer felt ashamed. Even so, coming out to him in the beginning stages of our dating was decidedly daunting. For the first time in my adult life, I was really ready and willing to trust another human being on a deeply intimate level, and I was terrified my disclosure would jeopardize our budding relationship. It wasn't rational, It was visceral. It felt eerily similar to the moments immediately before telling my parents. My fears were once again unfounded. He listened empathetically, and I was reminded again of the cathartic power of sharing my story. He understands that my rape is a part of my history. It doesn't count against me, and it doesn't define me, but it does impact the way I approach life. As it turns out, it also affects the way I parent. My husband and I have 2 young children, and although they're too young to understand the concept of sexual assault, let alone talk about it, we've already begun teaching consent in age-appropriate ways. And consent is a two-way street. As vital as it is for our kids to know they shouldn't be touched without consent, they also need to understand and respect others' boundaries. We talk about this regularly with our daughter and plan to do the same with our son as he grows up. Now in my mid to late 30s, in a loving relationship and a mother of 2, I've come a long way from the teenager who lived in fear and was well-versed in self-loathing, thanks to my empowering trifecta of self-disclosure, feminism, and a supporting partner. I'm proud of who I am today, and I love myself deeply, not in spite of my rape, but because I triumphed over it. It has been a learning process about my own strengths and power, and an inspirational jumping off point on many occasions. The value of speaking up can't be overstated, especially in the face of adversity. I encourage anyone suffering in silence to develop their voice with confidence.
Well, it definitely teaches us why it's so important to develop your voice and why the work of healingSPACE is so important to help survivors on their journey. And I'm so grateful to survivors like Maureen who share their story, because I know everyone here today who just listened to her essay really has a much better understanding of what a survivor goes through. And some of us here are either law enforcement or clinicians or volunteers in different ways who do this work. I'm sure we're all taking it on when we leave here today with a feeling much more empowered and a greater understanding and sense. So we're so grateful for you to share your story. As we get ready to close out, I'd like to invite one of our board members who's here today, Ms. Christine Ordway, one of our vice presidents, to just say a few words. The YWCA is obviously a large organization with lots of programs. healingSPACE is one of them. But our board takes this work incredibly seriously and keeps it as a top priority as they move forward with their plans for our organization. So, Ms. Christine Ordway.
Thanks everyone for being here. I have been involved in this community for a long time. I've done a lot of work in Patterson with Oasis and Eva's Kitchen. I'm on the board of the Covenant House as well, and a lot of the young adults that come to the doors of Covenant House in either Newark or New York or all across the country and the world have suffered from domestic violence, or sexual violence. So this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I applaud the survivors that do express themselves through this project, and as Maureen did, because it is difficult when you experience something like that to turn it into something positive. But many of these people fortunately do. They're resilient, and I really admire that so much. So I hope that you spread the word about domestic violence and sexual violence. I joined this board pretty recently and really didn't realize the scope of what the YWCA of Bergen County does. But as soon as I heard about their mission, I was in with 150% of effort. So I applaud all of you.
And with that, we'd like to thank all of our speakers for sharing their thoughts with us today. I do encourage you to follow Maureen. As an activist, she will continue to share her story, and I know it will continue to inspire you. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy days to be here. And again, I do encourage you to take a snapshot and to share it on your social media. Just if you think about the amount of people here and how many people all of you are connected to, it really gives us the opportunity to get the word out far and wide to a very diverse group by just you doing that very small act. So I encourage you to do so. Thank you again to our staff at healingSPACE and the YWCA for pulling this together. Thank you for all of the volunteers who made this effort happen, and it's not over. They have to take it all down, and that's a big job. So we thank you in advance for the hours that that's going to take later today. We're so grateful to our community partners for getting the word out. We're so impressed with the showing. We've had such commitment from our groups and such enthusiasm that we brought the event back, and looking forward to doing it again. Together, we raise awareness, we work to prevent personal violence in every form, and we help survivors heal, and you have been a part of that by being here today. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.